Welcome to the podcast for real-life heroines. Let's embark on a journey that unveils the extraordinary stories of everyday women who redefine what it means to be a heroine or hero. Life is a tapestry of inspiration and magic, and today's episode is no exception. Here's your host, Susanna Liller.
Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining me today. And soon I'll introduce you to my guest, Alexsondra Tomasulo. And she just had her cat here. I'm wondering if Lucia is still with us. Alex, is she here?
She's wandering around.
Okay, we might see her too. All right, let me just tell you a bit about a real life heroine. Alex is a lifelong artist and compassionate host. She opened her Airbnb, The Artist's Haven, in 2017 as a sanctuary for creative and personal exploration. With guests arriving from across the globe, and she's not kidding, from Mongolia to nearby towns, she offers each visitor a customized experience, whether they seek solitude for deadlines, healing through grief counseling, or simply a restful escape. A potter for 5 decades and a writer for 2, Alex views making pots as meditation and writing as its reflective insight. Her work so I once heard that meditation is receiving and prayers is asking. And it's sort of like, I think, what that means. Now in her 70s, her work explores themes of grief, death, forgiveness, love, and transcendence through essays, poetry, and philosophical musings. And I want you to please be sure to listen to the very end, because I have asked Alex to read one of her beautiful poems. Now in her 70s, she's part of my club. The 70s Club. She continues to embrace life with hope and reverence, offering peace and acceptance to all who cross her threshold. And from her writings, she tells us, I believe in the power to heal through journeying into one's own interior, asking ourselves the right questions. In effect, we are at the water's edge, deciding whether to jump in or just tickle our toes. Of course, timing, she says, is everything. So, I love that. Dear listeners, I trust you're ready to jump in with Alexsondra, Alex, and me, and we're ready to do that. Alex, you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. So, we're going to start by me lighting a candle.
And I'll light mine here.
Okay, because it's a sacred time whenever heroines on the journey share their stories with each other. And that's exactly what you're doing with me. So, and I thank you so much for taking the time.
And I thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Quite lovely.
I know that you have a ton of wisdom to share, and my job was to, sort of pick from those things that I thought that women listening and men listening, if they are, could benefit from. But the first thing is sort of, well, I don't want to say women oriented, but anybody who's ever hosted a potluck knows that they're really fun, that you don't have to cook the whole meal, and people bring things that you never have eaten before or never imagined, and it all somehow miraculously goes together. Well, Alex, tell us about, and I think this happened shortly after your husband passed away. You decided to have a potluck, but it was a different kind of potluck. What kind?
It was a gathering of very dear friends of mine. And I have a very childlike attitude that if I say, I love this person and this person, and I have 6 or 7 or 8 people I love, and not everybody knows one another. And I think, but you have to know them. It's much the way you do. You just want to increase that.
Right.
And you can't guarantee deep or long-term connections, but you're opening doors. And so I gathered together a group of women friends and said, I'm having this gathering, to which they were very shocked because a gathering to me is 3. And I, because I have a difficulty with large groups. So at any rate, the point of it was to offer a landscape of having my friends come and see that we can gather together and acknowledge that we really love one another, not because we're trying to impress, but just because we really enjoy each person's presence. And what's very unique about that is I might like going to the movies with this person here, and this person here doesn't like going to the movies. So she might find a different person, and we find different avenues into people. And when you share, oh, have you met Sally? Yeah, sure. I go to the movies with her every day. Movies? I don't like movies. I love Sally, says the non-movie goer, but we always take walks in the woods. So there's that.
It's and like a bouquet of all.
Very well said.
Yeah.
Very well said.
But Alex, one thing that you stipulated for this particular potluck was different from usually we say, bring anything you want.
So I said, you're going to bring something, but you may not bring your special,
meatloaf
or whatever. You have to bring something you've never made before. And to be clear, if you've made only chocolate cakes, you may not make a vanilla cake. A cake is a cake is a cake. So we all had to scramble to find different things. Popovers came and souffles came and different salads came. And I made the little French cookie madeleines, and they had to bring them. You only make them once. You can't practice. You make them once for the event. If they're burnt, if they're a flattened souffle, you bring them.
So what I love about this is that it's like you're inviting them to leave their comfort zone and try something. They don't even know how it's going to come out, but it's great practice for the heroine's journey when we go and step over into a new threshold. And you also said to me, you said that you're making, in a way, it helps you make whenever you step out of your comfort zone, but this makes space for a new version of ourselves. It's not Alex with the trusted meatloaf recipe. It's Alex with the who knows what recipe.
Yes, as a matter of fact. And usually, oftentimes, things come through much the way it did at your gathering, where you have a question and a person answers it, and then the person who's doing the answering says, funny that I chose that as my answer. I had 6. So funny I chose madeleines, and they're supposed to be buttery, but because I have an Italian hand, they were more than buttery. They were floating in butter. Like, I don't think.
So I'm sure they were wonderful. Well, nothing better than butter. Yeah. So Alex, go ahead. I just want to say that idea of yours, what you did, I'm going to do the same thing. And maybe that will be our next gathering, maybe in September, and have everybody bring who knows what. So it will be great. Yeah.
It's a way of saying, I've been invited. I'm the gift. And I'm going into a group of women or people, as the case may be, who want me as a gift. They're not looking for the thing that I'm carrying. And it brings in trust and a real giving and receiving.
Yeah.
So that we can come together in disappointment because the popovers got burned, or laughter, but there's always love and laughter.
Yeah. Maybe learning, like, oh my gosh, that recipe was amazing. I'd like it.
There was a margarita cheesecake that took the whew,
Surprise.
definitely.
So now I'm moving into a different topic, and it's very different. And I mentioned that your husband had passed away, and I think that was in 2014,
2013.
13, and it was very sudden.
Mhm.
And you have written a lot about your grief and about grief in general. You describe it as being thicker than pea soup. Um, you had been in, and so it left you because it was when he passed so quickly, unexpected. You, the money wasn't there the way it was before, but so things were dismal. But then you also say grief is a door. So say more, if you would, about that experience and how grief could be a door.
So grief, first, I think I need to say that obviously we do all grieve differently. And those of us who've had healthier beginnings as children are better able to grieve because it's a letting go time. Um, Oftentimes, especially as women, if women have lost a child, for instance, but they have four others. And so they have to compartmentalize that grief. Yes, they're grieving that child, but oftentimes grief gets so compartmentalized that it might take decades to look at. And one usually has what I will call an original grief. The day I saw my cat die, it can be that profound. It can be the day I saw my grandfather die, or not death, the day my father left me. So for me, it was an abandonment, and that's my first grief. And until I resolved that and reconciled with that, I was not capable of really grieving this event in the right hand without feeling the weight of everything from the past.
And that's because you probably pushed it down.
Push it down, and you do the best you can. You try all kinds of techniques to get by, but it will resurface. I had a wonderful guest here who lost a child. No, I'm sorry. She lost her brother, and she was very little. And the grief came up when she was in her 50s.
Yeah.
I lost a brother, the first brother that I lost. He was in his 20s, and I was in my 20s. He was a couple of years older. I was pregnant with my first child, and he was killed violently. So I had these emotions juxtaposed of the oncoming birth of a child and the loss of my brother. I thought I grieved him. It was 23 years later, when I was pregnant with my second son, that I went to the nurse and I said, something terrible is going to happen. I don't understand this. And she said, well, let's look at that. She said, how was your first pregnancy? I said, well, it was fantastic. I said, I was in Manhattan. I walked up and down. I ate everything. I loved being pregnant. Couldn't have been better. She said, really? Where were they? I said, she was in Italy. She said, did she come home before you gave birth? I said, like it had never hit me before. I said, oh, yeah, she had to come home because my brother was shot and killed. And I went, oh, that would be that. And it just, boom.
Came out of you. Yeah.
Came out.
Yeah.
And so you can either choose to turn your back on these moments or look right in them. When you look right in them, you're looking into yourself, and things start finding places they move around. There's motion, there's movement. However long it takes one, whether it's a day, a week, years, it doesn't matter. It's so worth it. Yeah. Those doors opening are I think all our first grief is the day we're born.
Yeah.
The day we're born is our first grief because we've left.
Right.
For those of us who acknowledge a God, and whatever term you want to use, but your source, you were given this life. You didn't just manifest like that. And you're leaving the most precious, divine,
Right.
and that umbilical cord is stretching. So how do we get back there except through that?
Right.
And it's magnificent. It's profound. It's humbling.
So such wisdom that we do. We can choose to open that door. We can keep it shut for years, but eventually we need to look at that. Yeah.
The irony is oftentimes we're not even aware we're keeping it when it comes as a surprise, as it did with me in that particular grief instance, where you think, I took care of that. I did that. But we all know that grief is not like washing a floor. It comes when it comes, and it has a life force of its own, and it rests when it rests. And it's a very, very precious gift.
So you mentioned something, of course, I know this about you, that you do believe in God or spirit, however, and we'll talk about the spelling of God in a minute. But I wanted to ask you, because obviously just how you speak about grief, you have a spiritual belief in, and I know that you nurture that with a mourning practice. And just if you could just outline what that is for us, because I know you stick to it religiously, and it's important to you, and it sort of really keeps you where you want to be. So tell us what you do.
Well, first, let me tell you that a few decades back, I was teaching a group of women who were financially quite comfortable, had reasonably good lives. And I don't know, somebody started the conversation about money, and somebody said, well, how do you know that when you're rich enough? How do you know what's enough money for you? So they came to me and I said, oh, enough for me would be to be able to go grocery shopping, not to bother with coupons, and get what I want done. And they looked at me and I said, well, what can I say? I've worked really hard my whole life, always having to get up early and get out early. And now I'm gifted with the ability to stay home. I don't have to leave the house before noon, except rare occasions. That is a big, private, intimate space of me and God. And so I start the day, and I call it my holy unfolding, where I come first, God comes first, and our relationship comes first. So I think it's important to have disciplines. And I also think it's important to tweak them periodically and change them so they don't become like rote.
Right.
So at any rate, I do a series of exercises, physical and breathing. I do Tai Chi. Tai Chi I do every morning. My physical changes a little bit. I do a litany of, these are my mala beads. I do a litany of self prayers and gratitude prayers and mantras. I may or may not say the rosary that morning. And after that, I read one little excerpt from a little book that somebody gives me from their church. And then I spend time reading a little bit from the Old Testament, a little bit from the New Testament, wherever. And because I have reading disabilities afterwards, and I'm putting this out there for people who are overwhelmed sometimes about reading books that they might not get, they're just too, what was that meaning? Right. It's the Bible. So if we believe in God, I close it after reading it. And I think, well, those were beautiful words. I'm not sure I got any of it, but, just press what I need from my mind and heart, press into me from my understanding.
Mm.
Let it,
Mm.
it's such a moment to take and give thanks that we've got this new opportunity, this new day of opportunities, challenges, heartbreaks, joys.
And you find that,
It
well,
sets
of
my
course,
tone.
yes, and it probably sets the stage for a great day. It does.
It really does. It really does. Because I'm not walking it alone.
Alex, so somehow I thought you were going to tell me also, because I know that you do this, and I think you do it year round, that you go for a dip in the ocean.
If the ocean was like 3 minutes from me, I would do it every day. But I have to get in my car and drive 10 minutes. And it's not far, but when it's cold, that means I've got to get on certain gear, go out, da, da, da. Yes, going to the ocean is how I know I'm alive.
And then you told me you actually, I mean, it's only complete if you dunk your
If you
head.
dunk your head. Now, I don't always dunk my head anymore. I'm a bit older and my circulation is not what it used to be. But every now and then I do.
Well, you've inspired me, and I'm going to think about it when I go into the cold, cold Atlantic waters this summer. And usually I just run in screaming and quickly dip in, run out screaming, and that's in August. So I'm going to work on
I know.
dunking.
My buddy and I are laughing hysterically. I mean, but we've stopped going in screaming because of these three people who taught me this.
Oh,
I watch these three people and they come with a little towel, they put the towel down and they simply walk to the edge of the water and walk in, and they're floating on their back as if it's 80 degrees. It's 45-degree water. So I asked them, and this is what they do. And I followed it, and it has increased my metabolism tremendously. Instead of screaming, calm yourself to like a meditative state. So you're shallow breathing, you're calming your inside. And then you walk to the edge and you simply acknowledge as you step in, yes, it's cold. Because when we're screaming, we're saying, and we're resisting. And so metaphorically, it really serves to help us in so many other situations. How many situations do we encounter that we magnified by our resistance
this is perfect.
unwittingly?
Right. Perfect. This is what I needed to hear this morning.
Unwittingly, you can't. And so now I just say, yep, it's
Okay.
cold.
All
And
right.
the other gals are like, she's walking in just like that. I said, it's cold. I'm not saying it's not. And okay. And before you know it, I'm in for 20 minutes.
There you go. All right.
Water.
I'll report back to you how that works for me.
Do it.
So let's get to your spiritual journey, because everything we've talked about, it's clear that you have this strong spiritual underpinning. And you describe yourself in your writings as a spiritual mongrel. You've tried all different sort of things. Um, and I guess that the essay that if you could just touch on briefly, which talks kind of about, I think, your movement more into spirit, is the funny looking man post.
Oh.
Can you just share a bit about what that's?
I think so. Just let me preface it with I do believe that we all start out and we all end up where we're supposed to be. And you think, did I just chase my tail in life? I'm back here, but you're not, because it's a spiral.
Right.
And it's many spirals going in and out of itself.
Many.
So the funny man was a priest many moons ago who had an incredible ability to be a conduit for God's love as he prayed for you. And he's part of a charismatic movement where people fall and rest in the spirit. At the time, I was filled with, let's say, an abundance of arrogance. I was set forth to prove this man baloney.
A charlatan.
Absolutely. And how dare he prey on my mother.
Right.
So I always had a sword ready. So I'll shorten this. We had a very good conversation. He asked if he could pray. I said yes. My knees softened, and that was it. And he afterwards asked me to say, how do you feel? I said, I feel fine. I said, quite full of myself. He said, so you didn't feel weak or anything? I said, look, you had your hands on my shoulders. Do you think I'm an idiot? That's the power of suggestion. I was so convinced. He said, oh, I see. So the next time I met him, we talked more.
You went back. How come you went back?
He asked me back, and he was so respectful. I don't have a big bucket of people in my past that would listen to me that respectfully, as bratty, as arrogant, as full of myself. Oh, please. And I mean, when he said to me in the first one, you seem to be very comfortable as a Christian. I said, well, I am. And he said, you don't seem to be comfortable as a Catholic. And I said, well, I'm not. and he asked me why. And I said, I think Catholicism has become anti-Christ. And he simply said, that is fascinating, or something like that. It was so like non-confrontational, non-patronizing. So at any rate, when I went back, one of the questions he asked me was, who are you? Do you know who you are? And I thought, oh man, I've met my match here. So I told him my name, my title of this, title of that. He said, I want you to know that those titles are wonderful, and I bet you're very good at them, but they have nothing to do with who you are. And so why don't you might want to start asking yourself, who am I? And at the end of that session, he said, may I pray over you again? And I said, certainly. He said, I noticed that you're not comfortable with my hands on your shoulders. So you stand over by the door, and I'll stand back here. It must have been at least 15 feet away. He started to pray. Within seconds, I felt what I absolutely was certain were his hands on my shoulders. And I was so full of rage of the thought of this man betraying me that I swung around only to see him peacefully standing 15 feet behind. In a split second, I just fell to the ground without any power. It was nothing that I did, nothing that I deserved, nothing. All that I know is that I rested deeply in what's called the Spirit, and I rested in God's love and God's grace. And so it's been decades since then.
But you feel that experience, well, how could it not make you realize that there's something operating here that your arrogance couldn't define, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I think that if one is sincere, because God knows all of us. He knows what motivates us, and that's what's important. What's motivating my arrogance was just because I couldn't believe in anybody. And I kept going because I wanted to know for sure. When I was 13, I left the church. And I was on the steps of the church as I looked up to the skies and said, all right, it's between you and me. If there is a you, God, you're going to have to talk to me directly, because I can't understand any other way, and nor do I trust. So it's been a very, very long journey. Hard. It didn't have to be that hard. But as I said, I needed to know. I just peeled back every layer that I could, and I'm still peeling.
Right.
Still trusting, and mostly humbled by, we see this in all kinds of people who, especially, people who were alcoholics, and they find that they're forgiven, they're not only forgiven, we're brought to a place of self-forgiveness where we can release.
Right.
And we can be polished, completely brand new on the inside.
Because if you can't forgive yourself, how can you forgive other people? I mean, it starts here always. So tell me, because I had to ask you this question when you and I did some emailing and you wrote God as God G
Dash.
G dash D. And
Yes.
I said, why did you do that? And what did you say?
So G-D is the way most Jews that I know, and in their literature, write the word. They'll say God. They don't say it's G. But they write it because it's an act of acknowledging that we do not know God. When we see the written word, we're saying flower, and we know a flower. When we say daffodil, now we know yellow. We're kind of knowing all about that. Quite honestly, between you and me, even though you might think you know everything about a yellow daffodil, there's more.
No.
There's just more. So it's acknowledging that we don't know all. It's acknowledging that we can be humble to that which is greater than us. It's acknowledging that there is a great mystery to what we call life.
And you said something about a pause.
It pauses. You pause. There's a breath in there.
Right.
How many breaths do we take in a day, not realizing, oh, that was a good breath.
Yeah. And the immensity of the word we're saying, we're not really thinking about it. I think it's an excellent, I had never heard of it before. I'm so glad. That's another thing I've learned from being with you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It really means something to me. And as I write it, I feel I did not use the word God for many, many years because I didn't want to feel that I was excluding somebody who called their creator
Right.
another name.
Yeah.
And I have very intimate conversations with God and Jesus. And as a matter of fact, one time when I was in a semi-meditation and I was grieving about my husband, the Indian icon of Ganesha. I don't know if you know who Ganesha is.
The elephant god.
Elephant. Yep.
Yeah.
He came to me once many decades ago, and he's the mover of obstacles. So fast forward, I'm having this conversation with Jesus, and I'm weeping and laughing through this grieving, and Ganesha comes, makes himself visual to me. And I feel a sense of, oh dear, I was talking to Jesus. I hope Jesus doesn't think I'm betraying him. Like I'm looking where I'm not supposed. You know, the Old Testament of like, thou shalt not have false idols.
Right.
Kind of.
Right.
It's impressed upon me that we are all one. There is no separation. There is none. Nurture a good heart, nurture a clean heart, nurture a pure heart. Imagine your insides shiny and you're going for that. And not to worry about the rest.
The follow-up question to that. I know that priest said, do you know who you are? And I think you found the answer to that. And what do you say?
Well, I'd have to probably say I'm love.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Knowing you, again.
We're love.
Yes. Yes. Right. And
yeah.
And Alex, that's another word that I've hesitated to use. And it's so funny because I'm like you. I've tried to be not leaving anybody out if I say God. But I used to sign as a young child, when we wrote letters, we would say, "Love, Susanna." It was just a natural thing. And then it got so that I felt like I don't want to freak people out and say love.
Right.
They're going to think, I'm thinking now, the more I sign things, "Love, Susanna," the better. And I feel it, I'm not just writing it.
Because
So,
it's true to you.
yeah,
And
gotta,
that's important.
yeah, gotta say love more. Yeah,
Say love, say blessings, say
right.
joy.
Right.
And God, just I got over it. I just went,
Yeah.
if somebody has an issue, please ask me.
Yeah. Well, I have to stop asking you questions, except the last, well, actually, no, sorry. I have two more things to do.
Okay.
One is ask you one more question, then I'm going to ask you to read your poem, The Cliffs of Moher.
Yep.
But Alex, we have talked about a lot of things,
I
from
love
potlucks to
it.
swimming in cold water to God to love. Now people listening have heard this, and if you wanted them to just don't remember anything but remember this, people listening, what would you say to them?
Oh, remember how much you are loved, how
Yeah.
you are matter, how much whatever you go through it 150%. Acknowledge it, release it. Yesterday's gone. You're magnificent. There's no other miracle like you.
Mm,
I don't care. I mean, murderers are transformed
yeah,
and transcended.
right.
It is, if you feel that you've done something or suffered something that is so horrible, or that somebody has done something to you that's so difficult to forgive, just sit with it. You don't force it. It'll all happen in time.
It's like your approach to cold water. Don't resist.
That's it.
Calm yourself and wade in.
Not like cleaning a floor where you have to, my grandmother would scrub a floor like that, like she was getting more virtuous. And you don't. You can just do it gently like that. It still gets clean.
So will you read your beautiful poem
I will.
for us? And I'm going to admit why I particularly was attracted to this one of all of them that are in your Substack writings. But I, as you know, am going to Ireland in jeepers, almost 3 weeks, I think it is now. And I'll be going to the Cliffs of Moher. And this is so,
Oh, you
yeah,
are going to love
I,
every bit of
yeah,
Ireland.
I can't wait.
Just breathe in. Speaking of breathing, breathe in the scent of the bog. It's unbelievable. Well, thank you.
Yes.
So the title is actually called Being There. I was there at the edge of the cliff, belly to the ground for fear of falling. Essence of distant bog mingled in the salty spray. The heartbeat of the earth reverberated within me as your majestic ocean swelled as if giving birth to 1,000 sea creatures. Waves crashing tempestuously, yet not without love. I remained paralyzed in awe until I heard your voice through the booming waves below, one after another, after another. I don't know what I was expecting, only that I wanted more. Prayers are always answered, as it was that day when a single mighty wave hit the rocks below with such force as to splash my face baptism style. Humility and gratitude pushed my body away from the edge on that Irish day at the Cliffs of Moher.
Mm, beautiful, Alex. Thank you. I'm going to do the same thing. I'll have someone take a picture of me belly down at the edge of the cliff.
I think since the time that we went there when that happened was 91. I think they've put up a railing.
Oh.
I'm not sure, but
Okay, I'll let you know.
in other words, I think you can go to the edge more safely, but feel free to belly down,
Yeah.
because truly the other thing when we were climbing up, no, it wasn't there. It was in another part on the Aran Islands, and we were going up the hill to. I can't think of it right now. I don't want to waste your time. I was taken. This happened before that incident. I was taken by the whole presence.
Yeah.
And all the other tourists were like climbing up. They wanted to get to the top, and I was slowing down. And my husband said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I just can't tell you how magnificent this place is just hitting me." And I lay down on the ground, belly down.
Yeah.
And my husband, great sense of humor, he, the Irishman, said, "Okay, what are you doing now?" I said, I've never had this happen. I can feel the earth just beating into my belly.
Yeah.
And he said, okay, why don't you tell us how you really feel, honey? He said, you're collecting a crowd. I said, oh, just let me. I said, this is so magnificent. You could pull that sod and put it over me and call me happy.
Well, yeah.
That's great.
And that's certainly what I've heard. I haven't been ever before, but the other person who's leading us talks about the power and the magic of the land itself. So I'll let you know. I'll give you a report out.
I have goosebumps just hearing it.
So Alex, thank you very much for taking this time and helping me share yet another story about a real life heroine who
very much.
has had many adventures and brave ones, having to open hard doors, right? They can find you on Substack. So it's alexsondra.substack.com. And we'll put this in the show notes so that they'll.
Thank you. I think it's AC Tomasulo.
Okay.
But
all right. I'll get it from you and put it in the show notes. And also your Airbnb in South Bristol, Maine. We'll put the address for that so people can find you. Yes.
Thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure. I can't even begin to tell you how grateful I am. And you do so much wonderful, wonderful work for all the women who
Thank you.
magnet to you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I would say right back at you. So everyone watching, thank you for joining us and being here, taking the time to listen. And I hope I bet you found more than just one nugget of wisdom that will help your day. So see you for the next one in the next month, and have a great day.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the podcast for real life heroines. Your time and presence mean the world to us. If you're hungry for more inspiration and ready to craft your own heroine story, connect with Susanna outside of the show. Visit susannalillard.com to discover her courses and programs designed to empower you on your journey. Until next time, may your days be filled with the courage and strength of a true heroine. Stay inspired.